Happy Monday. So I missed you all last week, but today we are tackling a big challenge for businesses on LinkedIn. We are talking about how to navigate the decline in organic reach for company pages while also leveraging paid strategies effectively. So if you are only interested in LinkedIn personal profiles and you don't do anything with pages, this may not be the Mondays with Mindy episode for you, but if you're curious, there's a lot to learn here and it'll be fun and informative. All right, so more on that in a moment. How was your holiday weekend? I took my kiddos to the Shed Aquarium in Chicago. For those of you familiar with the area, the day before Thanksgiving. Yeah, everyone told me I was a little bit, uh, ambitious for trying to navigate traffic on that day, but it really wasn't that bad. It was really, really fun. We enjoyed the dolphins and the belugas in the underwater view zone. So we'll probably be back. It was so crowded that it was tough to see all of the exhibits, but it was a lot of fun. I also took the kids ice skating for their first time, and it brought back a lot of memories for me ice skating as a kid and teenager. So, yeah, lots of activities this week. So now it is time for Mondays with Mindy. This is a weekly show at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, where I talk about all things LinkedIn pipeline, promo, and profiles. What I like to call the three P's of LinkedIn. Should we add pages to that? Because today we're talking about pages instead of the profiles. So, do you have questions about LinkedIn that you want me to answer? Be sure to like this post, whether you're watching live or from the replay. And if you leave your questions below, I will either answer them after the show in the comments section, which is really fun. I like to go back and forth, or in a future episode of Mondays with Mindy. So if it's a topic that deserves its own Mondays with Mindy, can definitely make that happen. So today, like I said, it's all about LinkedIn pages. So if you manage a LinkedIn page, you've probably noticed that your posts are not performing as well as they did last year. All right, it's a facts. But don't worry, because you're not alone. And there are strategies to kind of work around this and actually get people engaged and on the same page with you, pun intended. And we're going to dive into what's working, what isn't, and how to combine organic and paid tactics for maximum impact. So I haven't talked a lot about paid tactics. If you look in my archive, this is probably one of the first times I've talked little bits here and there, but today we're going to talk a little bit more about paid, which I think is going to be fun. So how does the LinkedIn algorithm affect pages? We've talked over the past few weeks about how it's affecting profiles, a little bit with pages, but mostly from the profiles perspective. So if you want to go back and watch those, the last 3 episodes are all specific to the algorithm and the changes and what we can do to work with them. So let's be honest, LinkedIn's algorithm, it can feel like an uphill battle. I mean, I'm on LinkedIn most of the day for my clients. Like, even if I'm running a social media program, say for the majority of my clients, it's kind of centered in LinkedIn. So I spend a lot of time here. And it's challenging for me. The data doesn't lie. Organic reach for company pages, it's really taken a hit. And even polls, we used to use polls, which were pretty helpful for a while. They've kind of lost some steam unless you boost them. So here's the good news. While the algorithm has shifted, there are still ways to adapt. All right. So LinkedIn isn't going anywhere. It's looking at what we're working with and saying, okay, what is LinkedIn trying to do here? And how can we change what we're doing in sometimes big ways, sometimes smaller ways to just adjust, something like that. So by understanding what types of content perform well and when to invest in paid strategies, you can actually extend your reach and get in front of the right audience. So sometimes you want a little bit of paid on certain things and sometimes you don't. It just depends. So the statistics that we'll talk about today, anything that I'm mentioning, I want to make sure I'm citing my sources. It comes straight from the Update Algorithm Insights report that was released in October of this year by Just Connecting and the one and only Richard Vanderblom. If you like statistics and you like to nerd out on LinkedIn, he's the one to follow. If you're curious about what's driving LinkedIn at the end of 2024, get this report. You can download it for free. You can also contribute because they do put a lot of effort into pulling these numbers together. So just look him up and look up his report and it'll pop right up. I'll also link it in the show notes. So this is a really helpful guide. I've been diving into it since it's been released. So what is that, like, wow, we're already in December now. So it's been a while. So remember, and if you don't follow everything that the algorithm dictates, That's okay too. I don't do everything that the algorithm says is advantageous because it doesn't work for the client, doesn't work for the followers. It's not ideal for the type of campaign we're running. So you don't have to follow everything exactly. All right. For those of you who are rule followers, you can break the rules a little bit. It's all about trial and error, and things are going to shift too. So this came out and is pulling data from, like the middle of 2024. Things are going to shift between now and the end of the year, and we'll have, new statistics in 2025. So feel like you have the autonomy and the permission to experiment, because that's what makes LinkedIn, I think, fun, and also how we learn and discover what's working. All right, so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Mindy Ramsey, and I have a small group program called the LinkedIn Accelerator for those who want to go from 0 to 60 on LinkedIn with their profile and network. I was targeting a January launch for this next program. I'm still in the middle of some website updates, to be honest. So that needs to be completed first before my membership area is up and running. So I will keep you posted, shooting for Q1 of 2025. But in the meantime, if you do want to work one-on-one, I do one-off sessions, which we can get a lot done in 60 minutes. So feel free to just hit me up and we can get you going if you've been antsy and want to get that LinkedIn profile dialed in or your LinkedIn strategy. So I help leaders who feel they are the best kept secret in the industry to become known as one of the go-to visible experts in their niche, so they can get new business, so they can network better and land their next opportunity. So if you're live or catching the replay, again, go ahead and give this post a like to show some social love. And also, I can tell that you're watching. So that's kind of fun to see who's watching, who's engaging. So it kind of lets me know how to also steer the topics, because I can see your profiles and all your smiling faces. So every reaction helps. And let's talk about the numbers. Okay, so knowing the numbers, again, caveat here, it's not the end all be all. I don't do everything by the numbers, but it does help us realize when it's time to change things up if a tactic is no longer working. So we talked a little bit about company page reach and how that has dropped. Unfortunately, it's a little bit tough out there if you've been only relying on organic strategies and you aren't using some of the techniques we'll talk about in a little bit. So total and median reach has taken a noticeable hit. Organic reach for non-sponsor posts, so if you aren't putting money behind those posts, has declined significantly, which does make it a bit harder for businesses to get their content in front of their audience without adding in a little bit of a paid strategy. All right. So if you're feeling like, do I need to go to paid? You might. So this drop can be particularly frustrating for smaller companies, because companies that have a little bit more of a budget and have ad dollars set aside, they can shift some of their ad dollars from Google Ads or somewhere else into LinkedIn, especially if they are B2B. Makes sense. So it can be tricky though if you are a smaller company or you have a pretty tight ad budget. So it's a stark reminder, LinkedIn's algorithm is evolving. Staying visible now actually does require a bit of a more strategic approach in thinking about these things holistically, not just from a LinkedIn perspective, but also from an overall business perspective. All right, so what can we do about it? So while organic reach is tougher to get, it's not entirely out of the question. I'm going to share some ideas in a little bit about what you can do, but the key is really to double down on formats and strategies that still work. So what I recommend is that you actually go into your LinkedIn page and look at the last 30 days. It's nice to do this every month. For me, it's like, okay, this is the beginning of the month. This is when I do it for all my clients. Like, all right, let's see how things performed over the month, because then you can see what shifted, what has kind of stayed the same, what is doing better than you expected. So it's also a great time, beginning of the month, to experiment with paid options. Maybe you want to supplement some organic efforts, especially for high impact content, or if you are doing any events, you want more eyeballs on going to these events, either online or in person. So by balancing these two approaches, you can actually work around the algorithm shifts and maintain a steady presence on your company page. Okay, so that's formats for engagement on pages. All right, polls are still, people are still using them. I wouldn't overuse them. I'd be very, very thoughtful. I think if you are using them from a page, but they can be really helpful. So I've talked about it in some recent Mondays with Mindy's about how I want to experiment with polls. So I will keep you posted when I do have some numbers to share on that. So polls are something I want to play with a little bit more, but thoughtfully and in collaboration with like the sales team, because that can be helpful. They a lot of times they're looking for insights, marketing as well, obviously. So just kind of asking some interesting questions. Sales is a really good resource for that to help you develop those polls. You're not just putting something out there and it's kind of pointless, So their effectiveness has started to slip. Like, for example, polls saw a 20% drop in median reach compared to last year. That's still not so significant where they dropped off the map. So I still think they're worth doing. It's just kind of don't have those high expectations that we had a couple years back with polls. So despite this decline, still native video polls, really, really good. These are the formats you're probably going to want to play with, in addition to your bread and butter image push, your GIFs, these types of things. Native videos. This is a really, really good one to focus on. I've talked about this in some of the other videos I've recently done. Native videos in particular, they are like a standout. And that's because LinkedIn is prioritizing them. It's really pushing people to these. If you have a LinkedIn premium account, you will get invited to things from Jamie. So I'm trying to remember Jamie's last name. Jamie, she runs some really, really good, I think it's Jamie Jackson, if I'm remembering correctly. She runs some really, really good like tutorials and how-tos. And lately she's talked a lot about video and how to make short videos and what LinkedIn is looking for. So I highly recommend, if you have premium, that you check out some of the prior LinkedIn lives over the past like 4 to 6 weeks, because I've been going to them and they're really helpful, because we hear from others that are not actually from LinkedIn about how video is working. So hearing from LinkedIn, somebody that is representing LinkedIn and LinkedIn's actual data, is really helpful, because we can see, oh, this may be why LinkedIn is doing that. Oh, LinkedIn really wants to push us this direction. So short, vertical, 60 to 90-second video, I would definitely start moving that direction if you aren't already, from your company page. It's performing well, especially from profiles, but from pages, there's still, I haven't seen as much adoption of it from the pages yet, at least the pages that I'm involved with. So I'm trying to steer people a little bit that direction and say, let's test it. We've been sticking with like the typical, what you're looking at right now, like a live stream, just the horizontal, but really experimenting with the vertical format to see what sticks. So the takeaway here, lean into these formats, but approach them strategically. Again, for polls, really think about timely, relevant questions that spark genuine interaction, because otherwise people are going to ignore them. They aren't the prettiest posts to look at, so don't overuse them. But I would experiment, once a month maybe. Especially if you have a pretty active LinkedIn page, once a month, throw one in there and see how it does. And then with native video, keep it short. Like I said, short and engaging, 60 to 90 seconds. Content that's informative or entertaining, or a little bit of both. I've seen some really funny page vertical videos that are entertaining, like especially around the holidays. There was a funny one I saw about Halloween and some office silliness that was going on from one company. And I was like, oh, that is so clever. Just have fun with it, especially if you have the resources, or you have somebody in your team who's pretty creative or likes helping out with these types of things. It can really help. So even with a slight decline, so again, we're talking about slight decline in effectiveness, focus on these formats, and experimenting with these in addition to the bread and butter stuff. Don't forget about the images and making sure that your posts are a little bit more long form than they used to be. Don't use links in the body of the text, the same basics, just, spice it up a little bit here and there. All right, so top performing posts. So posts that are falling into LinkedIn's top 5% for performance, they have some common traits. So let's talk about these. Again, they're longer. So a little bit longer. I'm doing that, especially over the past month. It makes me a little nervous, but I've started shifting some of the pages that I manage to longer form pieces of content and just the posts. Even if I'm promoting something and the client wants to drive them to a blog, I still am trying the longer form. And you can make stuff funny. You can like tell a story. Even if you are pointing to, a blog or something, you can kind of shorten it for people who aren't going to click over anyways. So you aren't giving them everything, but you are kind of teasing the piece of content and hopefully they click, So there's a little bit of give and take there, but you can have fun with it. Make sure it's a good structure so people can easily scan it. And also value is important on LinkedIn. We've talked about that. It is really important that it's not just fluffy content. or that it looks just like everybody else's content. So be careful with AI generated content. Make sure to add your spin to it, use it to help you figure out what you want to say, but probably say it in your own words, or mix up the words just a little bit to make sure it doesn't look like you literally copied and pasted it from ChatGPT, unless that's what you're going after. But it probably won't help you in the long run. So posts that are actually over 900 characters for those who want the exact numbers, and 20 sentences. So it's long, right? It's 20 sentences, 900 characters. It feels like a little bit of a mini blog post. So they actually are performing a little better than their shorter counterparts. If you don't have time to write long posts, that's fine. Do what you've been doing and adjust a little bit or add a paragraph or two if you can. So this suggests that audiences on LinkedIn are actually looking for a little more substance. I think we're also trying to figure out how AI generated we want to feel when we're reading the post. If I'm saying that correctly, I know I kind of word saladed that, but so we can tell when it is AI, and sometimes that's okay. And I think some people don't mind. So think about your audience and think about what they want to read. If you're like Mindy, I can only do stuff that long, write posts that long. If it's mostly AI generated and I spruce it up and change things up, okay, try it and see how it works. Does your audience respond to it? Okay. If not, then maybe you should try doing a little bit more organic writing, brushing up those writing skills. So just think about your audience, test things out, see what works, fit it within the parameters and the resources that you have. So this means your company page content, it needs to prioritize depth. So depth, it needs to be structured well. So depth and structure, what you're going for. Longer posts tend to work well, but they have to be broken up into those digestible chunks. That is like a tongue twister, with clear headings or bullet points. I don't like bullet points personally. Some people do, but I will sometimes use, depending on the page and the tone and all the brand guidelines and all that. Sometimes emoji can break it up a little bit. So it's up to you, but make sure that it's easy to scan. And if you're sharing like a lot of data, insights, thought leadership, make sure the post flows well so it doesn't look like you're just vomiting out numbers at people, because that's really boring. Very few people like to read vomited out numbers. Like add context, add a story, do something with those numbers to make it interesting. All right. So let's talk about 4 tips to improve your organic LinkedIn page strategy. And then we're going to talk about employees and employee engagement. Okay, so for those of you who are managing pages, this may be helpful. For those of you curious about the back end of pages, this could be fun too. So how do we work with these changes? We talked about a little bit. Again, prioritize that native video. Video content, 90 seconds, short, engaging, vertical. And we didn't talk exactly about what to put in here, but according to Jamay's recent LinkedIn live stream, she talked about and she showed some video examples of what's working now and stuff like thought leadership, where you're bringing a concept up and you're riffing on it from your perspective. Behind the scenes looks, this I tend to not do as much of, but it just depends on the types of clients I'm working with. But if you like to do behind the scenes types of videos, these are actually working quite well. Quick tips, you're going to see those a lot. Think, like TikTok, those of you like Instagram and Reels, quick tips, with like captions. And keep in mind too, that a lot, I forget what the statistic was, I should have written it down. I think it's like 40 to 60% of people will actually watch videos on LinkedIn with the audio off. So keep that in mind, because captions are important, whether you're using LinkedIn's, option to add the captions, or whether you are using like a tool like Opus Clip or something like that to actually add the captions in. Make sure that they're decent too. So make sure to kind of go through the captions and the transcript to make sure that it's readable and you're not confusing people with those captions. All right. So we talked a little bit about polls, and like I said, polls are not what they used to be. So be strategic with them, but they still work if you are doing them correctly and not too frequently. Ask questions that are meaningful to your audience and encourage responses. So if people are voting on the poll, ask them why they voted the way they did. Ask them to hop into the comments and explain their answer, or maybe they were stuck and they couldn't figure out which one, which of the 2 options or the 4 options to vote for, and they were stuck between 2 things. ask them to put that feedback in the comments, or if there was an option they wished you had added. So there's ways to keep the comments going and keep people engaged besides just hitting to vote in the poll. So again, don't overuse them, space them out to keep engagement high. I would do 1 to 2 a month max, but that's your personal preference depending on how often you post. Also, when you are using a combination of these things, you want to think about your feed. This is kind of like from the holistic point of view. When I am working on posts, I think about the visual experience people are going to have when they view the page. A lot of times people are going to see a post in isolation, but if they do come to the page and you're tracking how many people are viewing your page, a lot of people do. They come to the feed, they look at a post, they like what they see, and they want to see other posts. So make sure that it looks good. Like just mix up the formats in your content calendar. If it's all short vertical form videos, because you're like, yeah, let's do this, it's not going to have the same effect and the same oomph. So you need to mix things up. It will also show you when one format stops working that everyone was gung-ho on 3 months ago. So make sure to keep the bread and butter post in there and switch it up. Have some carousel posts, PDFs if you want to. PDFs, but make sure that they're short and cute. Native video, well-structured text post with an image at the bottom. Keep those posts that are a little bit long form. Try some short form too. Sometimes shorter form, even if it's not the most, engaged with post, sometimes that's the right post to do. So just because something isn't the most engaged with post does not mean it's the wrong type of post to use. Mix things up, okay? And take time to craft content that resonates and tells a story. It needs to feel cohesive. And this is challenging. I think people think, well, I'm just going to use ChatGPT and create a bunch of posts and I'm just going to post them all. And they don't think about how it all fits together and the story that they're telling or when things are posted. All of that matters a lot. All right. So think about the story that your page is telling at every point in time. I think about every single post that's going up, how it's going to look in the feed, where it's going to show up, what post came before it, what post came after it, when's the next post coming. All of this is really important as somebody who is managing a LinkedIn page. So GIFs, I like these too. Okay. So we haven't talked a lot about them, but GIFs can add some variety to your content because they're not quite images and they're not quite videos. So I like to use Canva to create images, and then I will just add a tasteful 10-second animation to the image. So it still looks like an image, and you have the image option for certain channels if you're cross-posting, but it has a little animation. It kind of gets people's attention. So I like these personally. Your choice if you like using them. And then think about your timing and engagement. So again, we're talking about the holistic feel of the page when things are going out. Peak times tend to be midweek mornings. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Those are your best days on LinkedIn. And then prioritize responding to comments in the first 2 hours. So even if you are a page, you are managing a page, you still should be checking multiple times throughout the day, especially if it's an active page, to see if people are commenting, reposting, resharing. Make sure you're following all the thought leaders at your company so you can see what they're posting so you can repost if that makes sense. So keep tabs on the posts on your page. This is just a part of good page management, and it signals to LinkedIn that your post is engaging and it's worth showing to more people, because on the back end you're fielding comments, you're liking things, people are tagging, and you're responding to them. So do good community management, page management, important. Okay, we're going to shift a little bit because on the organic side, the one thing we haven't talked about, we've talked about all the posts, the formats, the schedules, all the social media manager stuff, but let's talk about employee engagement, which is it deserves multiple videos. It's a very big topic, but one of the most effective ways to adjust to the declining organic reach is by getting employees engaging with the page. All right. And the fact of the matter is, this is important. So when employees interact with company posts by liking, by commenting, resharing, reposting, it signals to LinkedIn's algorithm that the content is valuable. It boosts its visibility, also gets in front of new audiences, and employee interactions extend the reach of your content. Because remember, if somebody likes or comments on your post, it pops to the top of the LinkedIn newsfeed in their connections feeds. All right, so you're seeing so-and-so like this post. and boom, it's your company at the top, yay. So that will help you to get around some of the paid promotion stuff if your employees like to share your content. But that means you need to think about what they would be willing to share. And this is a big mistake that I've seen a lot of companies like, I don't know why they're not sharing my content. I'm like, well, it's ugly, or it kind of sucks, or it looks like they'd be embarrassed to share it. It's not featuring them. It's boring. I mean, there's a million and one reasons why employees don't share content. So you need to make sure that it's desirable and that it serves them and makes them look good, because employees are very proud of their company page when it looks good and it makes them look good because, wow, they work at this company and they have a really great page manager. All right. So this is important. This is important. So to make this work, you need a plan. All right. So first, you need to kind of the company culture. If you're managing a page, you may not have control over the company culture, but during your marketing meetings, during your one-on-ones, your syncs with the team, really kind of foster that social engagement, and it's showing them the value of LinkedIn to their personal brands, and also, how it's going to help them. If it's not helping them, they're not going to do it. I mean, we can say they're going to help the company. It's got to help them. It's got to help them build their personal brand, look good. If you're mentioning your employees a lot, they're going to be more apt to share those posts. If you're tagging them in the post, more apt to share and engage with the post. So these are things. We're all human. So make sure you're thinking about this like an employee when you're approaching your post. So it's very tricky, because as somebody who's managing a page, you got to think, okay, what would an employee share? So you got to put on like the employee hat. You also have to think about, what is LinkedIn looking for? You got to think about, what does marketing and sales want out of this? What is the call to action? What metrics? So there's a lot to consider as you are managing a page. So if you get overwhelmed, it's okay. We all know how you feel. You're balancing a lot of things. Think like an employee when you want to increase engagement. So encouraging employees to interact with company content and providing easy to share posts that resonate with them and that will make them look good. So you also have to continue. This is not like doing a one training, getting everybody excited about employee advocacy, and boom, everyone's going to stay excited about employee advocacy forever, because you have a tool and you did a training and check, check, done. No, you got to keep highlighting it. You got to keep showing them the value. There's a way to do this, and every company is unique in what is going to work. So you have to think about your company and your teams and what actually gets them to share things and what helps them. So you highlighting their activity, just saying, hey, thanks for sharing this. This was super helpful. Look at the number of posts and impressions we got on this post because so and so and so and so shared this post. You guys must have awesome networks. I mean, it feels kind of weird sometimes, but you have to know your people, and some people are very competitive. So tapping into that a little bit. Some people just want to help out. So by thanking them, that's enough. So think about your people, and a simple internal email or Slack message with either engagement prompts, celebrating people, highlighting posts that perform the best can go a really long way in helping employees become like your organic reach boosters and helping the page. All right. You got to make this sustainable though. All right. So we're like, okay, we're getting people excited. We're creating great content. It's got to be consistent. Like I said, it can't just be a flash in the pan where you invest in an expensive tool and you expect everybody to use the tool. Tools. I have a love-hate relationship with employee advocacy tools. So it's really important that you think through the tool. Does this fit into the team structure? Would something like, if they're using Slack, or if they're using Discord, or if they're using a different app to do, internal communication, what is going to work best for the team? Sometimes an email is better. So you think about your team and what's going to work best. LinkedIn has a feature on the page where you can actually recommend a post to employees, and you can do this every 24 hours. I wouldn't recommend it that frequently, but if there's a high priority post, you can actually just use LinkedIn, hit that button, and your employees will all get a notification from LinkedIn that you're asking them to share a boost. Check out this post from the page. So that's a way to get around, using an expensive They are expensive. Employee advocacy tool, there's a lot of setup that goes into it. If you're going to offer incentives, there's infrastructure that's needed. So I would start simple. If you haven't done anything like this before, start simple. If you're looking to scale, that's when a tool can be really helpful. But start simple, recognize, celebrate employees. And then if your organization is larger or you want a lot more structure, people are asking for additional help, and you're like, hey, I've reached that pain point. I can't personally write, all of these posts, or people keep coming to me and I just don't have the time. That's when you're like, okay, maybe it is time that you need to look at an employee advocacy tool. Everybody's different, but just don't make it another tool for them to have to use that feels clunky or doesn't fit their workflow. Get their feedback. What's really helpful too is if you are just exploring employee advocacy, running a pilot program, with 5, maybe 10 people who are really excited about LinkedIn and social, doing a training with them and then talking with them and getting their feedback, doing a trial run with a tool or trial run without a tool and seeing what works for the team. That can be a helpful way to test it without going full on and requiring a lot of budget. So most importantly, keep the focus on authenticity. You don't want employees to just repost and not add their own voice. It's good if they just repost certain things, but encourage them if they have something to add their unique voice. Let them know some guidelines. It's really helpful if you are running an employee advocacy program that you do think through the guidelines and that you do give them parameters, because otherwise they're not going to know what's okay to share, what's not okay to share. This can be a simple, 5-10 page documents, longer if you need it. But this is a good way to provide some structure and some accountability as well. So everyone is on the same page when you do some employee advocacy initiatives. Okay. All right. So now we've talked a lot about organic. Organic is great, right? We like organic. Organic is free, takes resources and people, but you're not giving LinkedIn your money per se. So when should you use LinkedIn paid strategies? So if organic reach, you're like, okay, I'm doing organic reach. I'm trying, different formats. I'm doing all the things we're talking about today. I have some employees engaged. That's great. It's not enough. Okay, when you reach that tipping point or you need a new audience, your page isn't growing, people, you feel like your page is kind of faded into oblivion. This is where a paid strategy can come in and really be helpful. So first, think about boosting high impact content. So what is performing best on your page and boost it. It's really easy to boost a post. You don't have to do a ton of work on the back end. You will have to set up, campaign manager and all the setups when it comes to, LinkedIn advertising. But once that's done, if you notice a post is performing well organically, just consider boosting it to expand its reach. You don't have to get crazy with targeting at this point. You can, which is fun. I like the targeting aspect, very fun. But native video, event promotions, announcements, all of these are good things to boost and get more eyes on. And you can boost for impressions, just kind of getting it out there, more people seeing it, or for engagement, which I like. I tend to prefer the engagement option when you're boosting. So even a small budget can make a big difference in visibility. And what is small, it all depends. But if you're looking at this, putting about $500 behind a post shown to a solid target audience tends to work well and will give you an idea of oh, okay, that's kind of small for LinkedIn, but it's a way to test a paid strategy, and just test and see what types of results you're getting. Again, the more you do it, the more money you spend, the more you learn, the more you see how your audience responds better. But I realize a lot of us don't have big budgets to work with. All right, so target specific audiences. Targeting is key. So use LinkedIn's targeting options to get your content in front of the exact audience you want. You can do this by industry, by job title, company size, seniority. I prefer targeting by job title, same as when I'm doing LinkedIn lead generation and sales navigator. Using job title is usually one of the better options because you can get very specific, though it does take a bit longer because you have to think through every possible title, right? You're not just boosting to an industry or VP level at these size companies. You do need to be specific about the job title and not just the function. So you're not just boosting or targeting VPs in HR. You are thinking, okay, what is the actual job title for this person? You can start typing stuff in and LinkedIn will help you out. But spend some time, creating a solid job title list for targeting. Or, you may have a few different lists depending on the types of content, the types of audiences you serve. But once you have it set up, it's set up. All right. And then you can use it in future campaigns, but it's worth putting in the effort. You could use a tool like ChatGPT to help you come up with these job titles, or just start typing in titles that you already know. And LinkedIn will start prompting you and give you other ones that may be similar, which will help you build out that job title list. All right. One thing to remember, do not use LinkedIn's audience expansion feature. When you are setting up or boosting a post, it will a lot of times say, oh, audience expansion will give you more bang for your buck. And basically, it's diluting your audience and it's giving you lookalikes that are not really lookalikes at all. You want to be specific here, so don't use it. All right. All right. So now combining organic and paid, we're not going to go too deep into actual setup of paid strategies, but just realizing targeting matters. Start with boosting a post, figure out what your budget is that you're okay with using and testing to get some information from LinkedIn to see if a more robust LinkedIn campaign would be good. You want to think about organic and paid together. So experiment with running a paid campaign again on content that's already done well organically. And this ensures you're promoting content that resonates. You don't want to test something that is completely new or you haven't put it out there before, because you're not really going to know how it's going to perform. So if it's performing pretty well organically, chances are it will do pretty well paid, chances. It's not always like that, but if you're just getting started, it's a good benchmark. So I will usually wait about a day before boosting an organic post just to see how it's doing too. And recently I did this and I'm like, okay, let me give it a day and see how it's doing. And the post didn't do that well. I was like, okay, so let me actually set up, a single image sponsored content piece where I had a little bit more control over what actually goes into the post. And that seemed to do pretty well, so just experiment. Because sometimes something will not perform as well as you hoped. So, you can wait to boost it until you see how it's doing organically. All right. So LinkedIn is making it harder, again, for company pages to succeed without investing in paid strategies. But again, that doesn't mean organic is dead. So focus on the formats and strategies that are still working. And you can create a balanced approach that builds visibility and engagement. Maybe you don't have paid advertising, you don't have a budget for that right now. Great. Table that information for later, because a lot of times when you do hit a roadblock with organic, you're going to be asked, hey, can we try some paid? And you're going to go, yes, we can. And I have an idea of how to start it. So even if you're not using it now, just be aware, because that's how it happened to me. It's like, I would tell people I don't really do LinkedIn ads, because I just didn't feel that comfortable. And then you get thrown into it and you're like, this is really, really fun. And I really like this. So just be prepared. All that learning that you're doing about, LinkedIn paid is going to be helpful. LinkedIn also has some courses under LinkedIn Learning where you can get certified in LinkedIn advertising and some certifications there if you want to learn more. So I'd highly recommend checking that out if you're like, ooh, I like this, but I don't know enough about it. It's a really great place just to learn about the back end of the platform, especially if you don't already have access to a campaign manager account. So the key takeaway here, it's all about quality over quantity. So crafting meaningful posts, experimenting with formats, getting your people involved, being smart about when and where to invest your resources, and testing things. All right. Don't be afraid to test. That's one of the most important things on LinkedIn. Things always change. We're always testing and experimenting. So, wow, we covered a lot today. So thanks for hanging out with me. Let's stay connected here on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out if you want to discuss any LinkedIn, paid organic strategies or things that are working for you. Any further, if you want to do that in the DMs, that's great. If you want to comment below and start some conversations, that's great too. I am in the process, like I said, of updating my LinkedIn website and resources right now. So I don't want to send you to anything outdated, but if you do want to go hop on my email list, and you want a weekly email from me, you can do that just by going to my website, mindyramsey.com. You'll get a pop-up that'll say, join my list. Just join me there and you can stay in touch on all things LinkedIn. Until next time, keep those connections real and those conversations meaningful. And I will see you all next week. Bye for now.